evening from the News Radio 1120 and 93.7 FM KPNW studios. I am Bill London. I do the wake-up call Monday through Friday morning, 6 a.m. to 9, along with Gary Snyder on KPNW, streaming live online at kpnw.com. If you ever want to tune in and really get a full dose of just exactly how insane Oregon is. All right, this news brought to you by none other than Mr. Rick Dancer. I call him Mr. He's the one that asked me a long time ago to do this and really believes in the fact that, we try to dig into the stories that other people don't. If you watch the TV news, you're not going to hear this stuff. So let's get into it. And the first one, this is huge. And it has to do with the Labor Day 2020 fires that absolutely devastated Western Oregon, killing people, destroying thousands of homes, and causing utter havoc, including making the air unbreathable. We had the worst air on the planet during those fires. Well, the Oregon Department of Forestry has spent almost 5 years investigating these fires. And now we know at least the cause of one of them. And the cause? The United States Forest Service. Now, what ODF found out is that electrical equipment was not the main cause of the devastating Sandiam Canyon Beachy Creek fire in 2020. They released the information Wednesday. Electrical equipment, they said, just didn't do this. The new ODF report looked into the cause of that wind-fueled fire that broke out in Labor Day of 2020, and it swept through the Sandiam Canyon area, killing 5 people and destroying hundreds of homes. Now, what they found was of the 19 reported smaller fires that grew within ODF's North Cascade district on that day, investigators say that 7 were caused by downed power lines, but all 7 of them were put out by residents and fire crews. And they were determined not to contribute to the spread of the large fires in the Sandiam Canyon. The remaining 12 reports of fires were caused by embers from what was then known as the Beachy Creek Fire, which was under the jurisdiction of the U.S. Forest Service. It was a small fire, just over 100 acres, that the U.S. Forest Service decided to just let burn for well over a month near Opal Creek. This is something that the U.S. Forest Service frequently does. They do not fight fires on federal lands. They just watch them. Pacific Corp actually was found liable for the fires 3 years later. They were blamed for not shutting off power in the high-risk areas. The company, after this report, said, we're appealing. The Oregon Department of Forestry officials say that there was no evidence of other causes for the wind-driven fire that quickly spread through the Sandiam Canyon region other than the U.S. Forest Service fire that the U.S. Forest Service didn't put out. They said, we recognize the trauma that many Oregonians experienced for the Labor Day fires, which is why the department was dedicated to making sure these investigations and every investigation was thorough and a complete picture of what happened. And now the feds, by the way, and the U.S. Forest Service says, now that the president is cutting our jobs, it's going to put Oregon at risk for wildfires. You've already put us at risk. Oregon's progressive Democratic legislative leaders appear to be trying to make sure that Oregonians cannot purchase a gun or ammunition in the state. In a very dubious gut and stuff, yesterday, late in the afternoon, House Bill 3076, which was simply a paragraph, became a 22-page anti-gun store measure. And of course, with less than 24 hours notice, they said, we'll have a hearing on Thursday at 3 p.m. Gun dealers are already required to have a expensive, hard to get, and hard to retain federal firearms license. Well, House Bill 3076 would create an entirely new state bureaucracy under the Oregon State Police and an entirely new state license for gun dealers only, which, by the way, they define as any business that sells actual firearms or just sells gun parts. It also requires testing and training for gun store owners and all of their employees, including low-level counter clerks, to be able to mentally assess their clientele and somehow identify if the person buying the gun is suicidal or intending to make a straw man purchase. Those employees, by the way, will have to recertify and get a new license every year. It creates a new state bureaucracy, allowing the state to enter gun stores and go through all of their records at any time without cause, creating a new expensive license, and will force shop owners to add new physical barriers to ammunition, guns, and accessories, which are spelled out and kind of ridiculous if you read the bill, and allows the state initially to deny a gun store that's already federally licensed a state license to operate for any cause or reason that they decide. It also requires new signage for gun stores and a variety of other things. Each new employee, by the way, regardless of position at the store, will also have to undergo fingerprinting and a federal background check. Governor Kotek is touting the impact of her homelessness emergency order, reporting that rural communities exceeded the goals she set 2 years ago. Kotek says more than 380 emergency shelter beds were created in rural areas, more than 3 times her goal, and that over 800 families were rehoused. Now, this is the interesting part. Senate Republican leader Daniel Bonham actually just read quotes and actual data from the state's own numbers regarding the homeless crisis. And it's actually worse than when it was when Kotek took office. As a matter of fact, in 2023 to 2024, there was a 22% increase in chronic homelessness. Well, Oregonians overwhelmingly voted no to ranked choice voting in the November election. Not for the first time, but for the second time. And so now the Democratic leadership in the Oregon legislature is working to pass exactly what Oregon voters said they didn't want with House Bill 3166. The ranked choice bill has just been introduced into the legislature with a limited comment period, and ironically, one of the 4 chief sponsors of the bill is a local representative, John Lively of Springfield. So this was maybe one of the most notorious non-serial killing murders in Oregon history. I remember this very well. The lengthy, convoluted 1989 murder, and many believe that it was a hit job, on Oregon Corrections Director Michael Franke has taken yet another twist. Now, Frank Gable was jailed for that crime and was essentially railroaded by the state of Oregon and the Marion County DA in 1989. Now, that finding, by the way, was made in a federal appeals court. Since that finding, the Oregon Department of Justice has fought the ruling ever since until now. They even went so far as to try and take it in front of the Supreme Court, and they were denied. Well, current Attorney General, who just took office in January, Dan Rayfield, now has acknowledged that Gable is innocent, saying expediting the process for those who've been exonerated is not just about fairness, but about correcting wrongs. Now, until Rayfield made that statement, the Oregon Department of Justice and the previous Attorney General had been fighting the reversal of Gable's conviction that was made a couple of years ago, including his request for compensation, as allowed by state law. The Oregon DOJ, as I said, have appealed the reversal all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. And after the highest court in the land declined to consider the appeal, Oregon's DOJ fought Gable's request for compensation that he was legally entitled to in Marion County Circuit Court. Now, Rayfield also this week awarded Gable over $2 million and said that actually he's likely due even more than that. And you may ask, why such an abrupt turnaround? It's because former Attorney General Ellen Rosenblum, who was replaced by Rayfield, actually worked on the 1989 case where Gable was railroaded. Well, a work session was held on Oregon Senate Bill 1098, which aims to keep obscene and sexually explicit books on the shelves of libraries in schools by prohibiting discrimination when selecting or retaining school library materials. Now, House Republicans have said this is wrong. They say if you want a book on your library shelves that does not meet the standard to be read aloud on the House floor, it shouldn't be meeting the standard for our schools. That, according to House Minority Leader, Republican Christine Drazen. She said discernment is not discrimination. Common sense is not citizenship. So why did Drazen make that particular statement? Well, because it was made after State Representative Republican Dwayne Yunker of Grants Pass read aloud a sex scene from the book The Haters by Jesse Andrews, which Yunker said a constituent unsuccessfully tried to get removed from the Three Rivers School District in Grants Pass. And I'll quote him, from page 265, she guided me on my back and pulled on the bottom of my briefs, pushed them over my knees and feet, and I was completely naked and not hard at all. Representative Yunker read, she straddled me and pulled her top off. And then, without going into the rest of it, he proceeded to read a very explicit, hardcore sex scene from the book, which led to fits among Democrats on the House floor and even a Republican, calling it lascivious and obscene, and that it shouldn't be heard and read on the House floor. But it's okay for junior high school kids, I guess. So the University of Oregon is the only college or university in Oregon nationwide, and is part of 45 other universities under investigation for its partnership with the PhD Project. Now, that's a nonprofit organization that works to increase diversity in business education and PhDs, offering assistance in terms of mentorship, networking, and money to get a PhD. But whites are prohibited and not allowed to use it. Well, the U.S. Department of Education says that violates the Civil Rights Act and that the university, working in partnership with the PhD project, is violating the Civil Rights Act. Now, the U of O will only release a statement. They will not take questions from the media. They say that they take the complaint seriously and a review of their practices found they're in compliance with the law. And they say, well, they'll work with, of course, the U.S. Department of Education. They say we're committed to working with the Office of Civil Rights to resolve the complaint. And if you go to the PhD Project's website, you'll find out. It spells it out very directly. Minorities only. No whites need to apply. Your news brought to you by Rick Dancer, because he's a cool dude and he has awesome hair, whereas I have a clear cut going on. All right, Rick, get real.